and this gives us a really nice bridge to our last topic. Our final keynote will dive into something we've all had to do recently: adapt, especially when it comes to how we work. If the pandemic year has taught us anything, it's that the only real constant is change. How can embracing chaos and change help us not only survive, but truly thrive? James Hewitt is an expert on human performance, and he's here today to talk about the future of work and the concept of anti-fragility.
Hi, my name is James Hewitt. I'm a performance scientist. Over the last 15 years, I've had the privilege to work with a wide range of high performers in sports ranging from cycling and alpine skiing to motorsport, including in Formula One. However, the focus of my work and academic research is on knowledge work. That's work where we think for a living, a type of work I'm sure that many of you can relate to. I work with some of the world's top performing organisations to understand what is helping or preventing them from achieving sustainable high performance. To achieve this aim, I think about knowledge work as a cognitive endurance activity in a similar way that you may think about cycling as a physical endurance activity, for example. I have a particular interest in measuring patterns in the workplace. Patterns such as our daily rhythms of working hours, rest and sleep, but also our psychological and physiological stress and our cognitive performance. Whether you're in sport or in business, being able to rapidly adapt to changing conditions is crucial for sustainable high performance. This is perhaps true now more than ever. Uncertainty is at an all-time high. The Wall Street Journal went as far as to say that uncertainty is the monster that lives under the bed of every CEO. But it doesn't have to be this way. Stress and uncertainty are not always something that we should try to insulate ourselves from. In fact, top performers can transform uncertainty into a competitive advantage. However, this doesn't happen by accident. We need to learn to benefit and grow through uncertainty. A concept called anti-fragility can help to explain what we need to do. I'd like you to imagine for a moment a tea candle placed on a table outside in a garden. The air is still. The candle is burning steadily. But a breeze sweeps across the garden and extinguishes the flame. The candle has blown out. Now, imagine that you relight the tea candle and place it inside a storm lantern. The breeze continues to blow across the garden, but the flame is not affected. The candle is protected inside the lantern. Finally, imagine that you set aside the storm lantern and begin to build a fire pit in the garden. You stack up logs and set fire to small pieces of wood to start the fire pit burning. But the weather changes. The breeze becomes a gentle wind. However, instead of blowing out the flames, the wind increases the intensity of the fire. The flames grow and spread. Soon, the fire pit roars into life, bringing light and warmth to the entire garden. This metaphor illustrates the principles of anti-fragility. The tea candle is fragile. It suffers from the variability created by the windy conditions. When the candle is placed inside the storm lantern, it's protected. The changing environment doesn't harm the flame, but it's impossible to benefit from it either. When we talk about resilience and stress management in the workplace, we try to set up systems which are like the storm lantern. Our intentions are good. We want to protect ourselves and other people from stress and uncertainty. However, while this approach insulates us from the downside, we lose out on the upside potential, and we become less able to respond in the face of uncertainty. In contrast, the fire pit in this metaphor is anti-fragile. The unpredictable wind fuels the flames in the fire pit and increases the fire's intensity. Anti-fragility describes systems like the fire pit, systems which benefit from variability. Randomness, variation, and uncertainties actually improve the system performance. Humans have an incredible capacity to grow in the face of challenge and uncertainty, physiologically in our body, psychologically in our mind, and organisationally in our teams. Even prior to this pandemic, 75% of adults reported that they were feeling stressed. The Financial Times published the results of a survey at the beginning of 2021, where the majority of respondents reported that their mental health has been negatively affected by COVID-19. However, it's important to note that not all stress is bad. Considering the difference between feeling stressed or stressed out can help to describe why this is the case. Some stress can be exciting and challenging. Because you experience it as enjoyable, you might not even describe what you're feeling as stress, but technically it is. In this case, providing that there is a good match between the demands which are made of us and our capability to meet these demands, stress results in an activation, an increase in energy, which is then followed by a period of recovery. As we start to get used to the stress and challenge, our body and brain doesn't need to activate so much. This increases the capacity we have to quickly adapt to changing conditions and take on even bigger challenges in the future. However, if there is an ongoing mismatch, such as when we experience persistent worry, frustration, or a sense that the demands of our life are outstripping our capabilities, we can't recover and we struggle to adapt. This is being stressed out. If this level of stress activation is sustained at a high enough level for long enough, we experience something called allostatic overload, and we start to break down. Not being able to adapt in the face of persistent stress is obviously negative for our health, but it also has implications for our cognitive performance. The front part of your brain, called the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for a group of cognitive capabilities known as executive functions. You can imagine executive functions as the control center of your brain. One of the problems with excessive stress is that it overstimulates another part of our brain called the amygdala. The amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex, which can compromise the control center. This hijacking can also result in impairments in some of the most valuable cognitive capabilities for knowledge workers, capabilities such as collaboration, creativity, and complex problem solving. So, what can we do about it? One of the most important aspects for staying on the healthy, energizing side of stress, particularly in the face of uncertainty, is to balance the relationship between the demands that are made of us and our ability to meet these demands. This ability is underpinned by our sense of control and efficacy. If you're wondering whether you feel in control, ask yourself the following question. Do you feel as though you have autonomy? That means freedom to choose in relation to your day, schedule, and also your life more generally. Related to this, to explore your sense of efficacy, ask yourself whether you believe that you have the skills and resources to produce the results that you're aiming for. A recent academic paper shared the results of an analysis. It was based on medical data gathered from 3,148 people over 20 years. The study revealed that when job demands were high, but the worker's job control and cognitive ability were low, the allostatic load, which represents a kind of bucket of stress and risk of depression, increased. In turn, this increased mortality, which describes the risk of dying from anything. In contrast, if workers had a higher sense of control and greater cognitive ability, even when job demands increased, the allostatic load actually decreased and physical health improved. So the workers with a high sense of control and cognitive ability were anti-fragile. They adapted and got stronger in the face of stress and challenge. However, the issue for many of us is that we often feel like things are out of our control. I encourage you to start with small steps to take back control. Can you find some easy wins which will help you to begin to increase your sense of control? I have a question for you. When was the last time that you scheduled a break? You know, we used to have natural micro breaks built into our day, but the rise of remote work means that many of us are glued to our laptops on conference calls for more hours than ever before. We need to switch on when we need to, which many of us are pretty good at, but perhaps more importantly, many of us need to relearn to switch off when we want to. Effective breaks provide a moment to take back control in our day and replenish our resources. Some interesting scientific studies describe the most effective breaks. If you synthesize the findings, it seems that our daytime breaks should have 4 characteristics. 1. They are relaxing. This seems obvious, but it's important that you choose an activity where your cognitive load decreases. Try to step away from your screen for a few minutes. 2. The most effective breaks are social. You could connect with someone in person or even by phone or text, but communicating about non-work related topics can really help you to detach from work and enjoy a micro recovery. 3. Get active. Data from wearable devices indicates that we've been more sedentary than ever since the shift to mass remote working. Simply getting up from your desk and walking around your house or apartment can improve your mood, enhance cognitive performance, and even give your metabolism a boost. 4. The most effective breaks are natural. 10 minutes spent looking at a natural scene, even if it was even a video of a natural scene, was associated with enhanced recovery and subsequent improvements in performance in scientific studies. 2 of the most important characteristics of these natural breaks are that you see natural fractal patterns, number 1. That includes leaves rustling on trees or things like clouds in the sky. And 2, you get some bright blue-enriched light. This can significantly improve both mood and alertness. A time cue, which synchronizes an organism's biological rhythm with the Earth, is called a Zeitgeber. Meal times and even temperature can act as Zeitgebers, but the most potent cue is light. However, inconsistent light-dark cycles related to our lifestyles mean that we are gradually falling more and more out of sync with our environment. In fact, in industrialized societies, our body clocks are becoming more delayed. We feel like it's earlier relative to the Earth's day-night cycle, which means that it's more challenging to wake up in the morning and harder to get to sleep at night. This delay might be explained by weaker Zeitgeber time cues related to a smaller contrast between light and dark in our environment. For example, many people, when they work indoors, find that the light intensity that they're exposed to rarely exceeds 400 lux, even if they don't realize it. In contrast, light intensities from the open sky can range between 10,000 and even greater than 100,000 lux. Try to prioritize getting enough bright light in the morning to generate more contrast and provide a stronger Zeitgeber cue. This contrast can help to stabilize our circadian rhythm, our body clock, improving health, sleep, and cognitive performance. The results of several studies indicate that different experiences of demands and control are likely to form the basis for many health and performance outcomes, so it makes sense to explore how we can positively influence these factors. As we start to wrap up today, consider the following questions. In terms of control, try to find a moment to take a step back, reflect, and ask yourself, A, what is happening now? Has your situation changed? Do you feel able to influence what is happening? B, what should happen in the future? How could your situation be improved? What could be done differently? What needs to be corrected? And finally, C, how can you bridge the gap between what is happening now and what should happen? Is there something you can do to bridge this gap? Is there someone you need to speak to explain the challenges and the opportunities that you see? While it's clear that there is a powerful association between work stress and some severe negative health outcomes, there are lots of practical, simple steps that we can take to mitigate this risk, to improve both our well-being and performance significantly. I encourage you to pick one idea and try to put it into action this week. Optimal health and performance are underpinned by a general principle: contrast. Whether it's switching on when we need to, or relearning to switch off when we want to, or thinking about light or darkness in the right place at the right time. Whatever the case, stress and rest are the foundation for sustainable performance. I encourage you to reflect on the ideas I've shared today. Consider controlling what you can, but also accept what you cannot, so that you can become anti-fragile and learn to benefit from the unexpected.
Thank you, James. That was truly inspiring, and thank you for all the great tips that you've already shared so far. Now, let me ask you, James, what else can people do to build their anti-fragility?
Well, that's a great question, and just want to say thank you very much for your attention and for giving me the opportunity to share those ideas with you today. One of the aspects of anti-fragility that I didn't get the opportunity to share with you during that presentation relates to sleep. I spoke about it briefly, but thank you for the question, because it gives me an opportunity to talk about it in a little bit more detail. Sleep really is the foundation for sustainable performance, but many of us struggle to sleep enough or get enough quality sleep. So if I was to highlight just one thing that people could do to try and boost their anti-fragility more, it would be to try and guarantee as much as possible that they can sleep for 7 hours per night. If you sleep for 6 hours per night, so just 1 hour less, 6 hours per night for 2 weeks, our cognitive performance is equivalent to going an entire night without sleep. The challenge is that we don't even really notice. And this effect can even creep up on us in a single day. If you've been awake for 18 hours, that's equivalent to working from 8 a.m. in the morning until 2 a.m. the next day, your cognitive performance would be equivalent to being legally drunk. And that's not to mention all the metabolic, the kind of health issues which compromise our anti-fragility. They make us more fragile if we don't sleep enough. So my number one tip, probably not a surprise to many people, would be to find a way to guarantee 7 hours of sleep per night.
Wow, that's really interesting and thought-provoking. Now, building onto that a little bit, how does looking at our smartphones and watching our screens late in the evening, how does that impact our sleep?
Well, some people are probably already familiar with this idea. It's becoming more well known. There's various different articles on newspapers, on TV and the internet about how when we look at screens from our electronic devices close to going to bed, it interferes with our sleep. Now, there's people on this call who I'm sure will know much more about different light frequencies than I do. But essentially, the LED lights, which power our screens on our electronic devices, emit quite a lot of blue enriched light. Now, blue enriched light is great in the morning. It's something that I mentioned in my keynote. At the beginning of the day, it helps to provide that powerful Zeitgeber time cue. It increases alertness. It helps to provide a signal to our circadian rhythm, our body clock, that it's daytime. We need to be awake. The problem is that when we use these electronic screens close to bed, we send that signal that it's daytime at the wrong time. Ideally, it should be dark. The light intensity should be decreasing, and ideally, the colors that we get exposed to should shift from blue enriched light to more kind of oranges and reds. So some studies indicate that if you were to look at an electronic device within 2 hours of going to bed, so that could be a smartphone or a tablet or a computer screen, maybe watching Netflix, for example, then that suppresses something called melatonin production. And that suppression in melatonin production interferes with our body clock and can also disrupt sleep. So ideally, we'd create this bubble of darkness or increasing darkness before we went to sleep. But I recognize that that's not possible for everyone. We might not even want to. I like to watch Netflix in the evening, for example. The good news is that there's another body of research that indicates that providing there's enough contrast in our day, then that can actually offset some of the bright light that we get from our screens later in the evening. So again, in the keynote, I talked about how contrast is key with so many aspects of well-being and performance. So it seems that providing you've got enough bright light during the day, so you're in an office environment or a home environment that's appropriately lit with blue enriched light, for example, in the morning, or even get outside and go for a walk if you can. Obviously not in the middle of winter in Finland, it doesn't really work. But if you can get some of that bright blue enriched light in the morning, then the light that you get from your smartphone or electronic device at the end of the day, in contrast, isn't so bright. So it doesn't seem to disrupt your melatonin secretion or your body clock so much. So the message is pretty simple. These electronic devices can disrupt our sleep. Ideally, we'd not use them too close to going to bed. However, if you do, try to prepare for that by making sure that you get that bright blue light, particularly early on in the day. That would be my top tip for using your smartphones or tablets before bed, if, like me, you're hooked on a particular series on Netflix.
Thank you, James. Those are some really great tips and something for all of us to bear in mind. Now, my final question for you is regarding the future of work from a little bit different angle. So what do you think will characterize the future of work, and what should we all specifically prepare for?
That's a big question. How long have we got? Obviously, there have been some profound changes that we've all experienced as a consequence of this pandemic. But I think that one of the ways that we can look at some of these changes is that rather than these changes being new, actually they represent amplifications. So they've made existing changes, things that were already happening, have accelerated and grown bigger. So think about our use of technology and how we interact remotely now, for example. I think that one of the challenges with this is that it's accelerated this always-on culture. Prior to this pandemic, I used to travel a lot in my role. I probably would have been doing a keynote like this in person, for example. And when I arrived or traveled to this event, I would have had all kinds of natural micro breaks during my day. I would have been waiting in security at the airport, for example, which meant that I probably didn't have my phone. I might have just been looking around. I would have sat on the plane for a few minutes before I opened my laptop, before the seatbelt light went out. But we live in a world now where it's actually very difficult to take breaks. And so just to reinforce that point I made in the keynote, I think we need to prepare ourselves for a world that is accelerating, where actually it's going to become even more difficult to switch off unless we actually get disciplined about scheduling time for that. But there's another related point that is perhaps even more important. So I talked a lot about this concept of anti-fragility and how we can benefit from uncertainty. I think that one of the challenges with uncertainty is that the natural human reaction often is to try to minimize uncertainty, to try to increase predictability. Now, the problem with doing that is that if we try and minimize unpredictability, then actually we can end up making systems more fragile. Because when a big change comes along, actually we're less prepared to be able to deal with that, both at an individual level, but also an organizational level. And actually, because we've got this essentially an existential threat, a threat to our existence posed by this pandemic, it increases the pressure even more to try to minimize risk and uncertainty. So I think that one of the things that we need to be aware of and really prepare ourselves for in the context of the future of work is to think about ways that we can actually try to take small risks regularly. So that rather than trying to insulate ourselves from uncertainty completely and try to control everything, actually we become a bit more comfortable with exerting our control in an environment that is uncertain, almost embrace some of this uncertainty. Because actually we can see a lot of evidence in organizational research that organizations that embrace risk in a thoughtful way, this doesn't mean they just do crazy things, but organizations that encourage regular experimentation, for example, that encourage people to try new ideas in an environment where there's limited downside, but potentially massive upside. These are the organizations that seem to be able to thrive in uncertainty. And I think that one thing is really clear in the future of work, even among all this speculation, that things are only going to accelerate. We're probably going to have more opportunities, but I think that uncertainty is only going to get bigger. Things are only going to get more uncertain in the future. So it's really important that we try and prepare ourselves for that by getting comfortable with risk. So then just some of my ideas. Hopefully there's something there you can take away and maybe apply to yourself or to your team.
Definitely. Thank you so much, James. Thanks for all your interesting insights, and thanks again for your great tips. It was a pleasure having you.
You're welcome.
So, we've taken a good look into the future today. But now, Philip, I'd like to ask you, where do you think Helvar might be 100 years from now?
That is a very tricky question. I'll try to give you 3 dimensions in which I can think of Helvar 100 years from now. And those dimensions would be ambience, light, and people. And if I think of ambience first, then as we've heard today, light is really key to human well-being. And Helvar has been fortunate enough to be able to enable customers and partners to create lighting environments with great ambience and great energy efficiency. I'm sure we'll continue to be in this space for years to come. Light is another important dimension here. I don't think we have seen all the uses of light that mankind is going to invent. And I believe there will be an incredible amount of opportunity there. I think it's fair to guess and state that Helvar will be continuing to be involved with light, data, electricity, and control for as long as I can imagine. The third dimension is people. To be able to cope with changing customer requirements and ever increasing new technological opportunity, one needs good people who are able to take on the opportunities that these changes bring. So we will need people who are very good at listening, who have good amounts of imagination, who are profoundly professional, and who want to make a difference for a better world. Helvar, 100 years from now, will continue to be its people.
That sounds really inspiring. Thank you. 100 years of innovation has brought us right here to our Discovering Brighter Spaces event. This event has definitely inspired me, and I hope it has inspired all of you as well. Now, I'm happy to tell you that Helvar will be organizing local and regional events to continue the celebrations as soon as it's safely possible to do so. So stay tuned for that. After this event, we'll be sharing a survey, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And also, we'll be in touch with all of those winners of our prize draw. Philip and Adele, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you about Helvar's journey and the future. Now, Adele, would you like to say any closing words regarding today's event?
Absolutely. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time from your busy calendars and being with us here today. I'd like to thank our customers, our partners, our teams. A special thanks to the very inspirational keynote speakers for their insights into the topics. I wish all of you a bright future. Thank you and stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.